Hello, Copic in the Craft Room fans. It is Michelle Houghton here. Welcome back. This week we are coloring up, or I am coloring up, this adorable image by Power Poppy. This is from a digital set that Marcella created, and it's all these fun, whimsical images to friends and family and loved ones. This one says "You totally rock," and I have no idea who I'm going to send it to, but I just love the kind of the radio and the fun little heart flowers. So I'm going to do a little bit of a retro feel in the coloring. So I'm going to start with the background. I'm using some warm buttery yellows, and I'm starting at the center with my darkest of my yellows. So I'm starting with Y23. And I'm really just trying to fill in kind of a little bit kind of a circular shape in the background of these images and flicking out from that. I'm going to start dark to light because I really don't want to have to go back and blend these. I really just want it to blend as I'm going because there's a lot of detail going on. And so to fill in this background is fairly complex. It's part of why I'm starting with it as well. I'm hoping that if I start with a yellow and work through the background, that if I do make some mistakes and kind of cross over some lines, I can correct that as I color the flowers and the radio. So Y21 is that next layer, and I'm really just creating a ring that goes wider. So I start on the Y23 and I flick outward so that it kind of just blends together as I go. The next color I'm going to use is, yes, one of these new colors. I'm sorry, I've got a couple that I'm going to use this time. These are ones that I got while I was in Japan. This is a Y30. There would be some other colors in your collection that might work, but that's what I'm using today. So Y30, I'm using my chisel nib because this one only has, at least right now, I haven't replaced this with a brush nib yet. But it's working, especially because I know if I flick pretty lightly, it's going to fade to white on its own. I'm starting on the Y21 and flicking outward so that it softens that edge. I don't have to go back and do any blending, but I'm just flicking outward and creating kind of this warm glow from the back of this image. So 3 yellows are creating that background. And then next I'm going to start on some of these little flower hearts. So I've got an RV91. And I'm going to do the 2 flowers that actually look like flowers. And I'm going to do this center heart and the heart in the rock. RV93 is next. Notice I've switched back to going light to dark. Just touching in on some of those areas, giving a little bit of form and shape to those hearts and the petals on the flower. RV95 is my darkest color in this group. Kind of working from the base and center of the flowers upward, coming around one side of the heart and right into the center of the heart, and then working in reverse RV93 to soften those edges, starting on the RV95 and pulling that further into the area, softening the edge of the RV95, then going all the way down to my RV91 to soften the edge of the RV93. So filling the edges of those petals, the kind of left hand and upper edge of those hearts. And then I'm going to use a different combination. This time I'm going to go from dark to light on the other hearts. I'm starting with an RV34 this time. Not quite as much gray since it's starting. Those numbers start with a 3 instead of a 9. So it's a little bit brighter, but it's still not a real bright pink. I really like the RV3s. It has a real dusty rose feel to me, I guess. And I like that. So working my way around the one edge and a little bit down the center of each of those. RV32 is next, filling it in a little bit further, but all of them are going to end up with a little bit of white still showing. So I've got one more color, so I can reserve some of that for a little bit even lighter highlight on each of those hearts. Just working my way around. And again, I kind of mix up when I work from light to dark and dark to light. Reds in particular, because reds and RVs, because they have the red in them, tend to move a lot. So here's that other new marker. It's an RV30. And I'm filling those in. This time I'm using the sketch nib or the bullet nib on the end. It's a little bit of a fine point, but it works really well getting into those little hearts. And I just circle and blend those areas. But in particular with reds, because I'm trying to use less ink in order to not bleed out of my small areas, sometimes it works better to work from dark to light. So I made a command decision there. I forgot to get this kind of lacy edge on this other flower, so I'm going to use this second set of RVs. So RV34, and then I jump all the way down to my RV30 to complete kind of that lacy edge around this kind of central heart in front of the radio. And then I will go on to the greenery. So I'm going to use two YGs. I've got a YG93 that I'm filling in all the leaves and the stem work. Getting that all filled in just real gently. Now I realized as I literally went up this stem that I missed a part of background. I have this little teeny tiny spot that should be yellow, and I will come back and hit that with my yellow at the very end. But I do this all the time. I find these little tiny detail spots that I missed, and somewhere along the line when I'm coloring, it's like, oh, that's white. That should be something else. And I come back and fill it in just like that. And it works. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of shape to those leaves by adding another yellow green. So I'm going to come in with my YG97, and I'm going to go along the bottom half of the leaves, and some of them I'll come up the center and add a little texture. Some of the stems I'm coming from the base of the hearts and flowers down, coming from the bottom edge of the stem up a little bit. Just trying to add a little bit of push and pull, showing that shape or the flow of those stems and leaves, giving them a little more dimension. This is not realistic coloring. I'm not aiming for that on these. They're so small, it'd be hard to go in and try to do real detailed vein work. I'm not going to take that kind of time today on this particular image. So then I've got a series of blue greens that I'm going to use on this radio, and I'm starting with a BG10. It's a really pretty light blue green, and I'm going to fill in all of the radio. So I'm going all the way around. I leave the buttons white for now, and I'm leaving that front disc mostly white, but a couple of the rings I'm going to add that BG10 on and that center dial. Then I'm coming in with a BG23, thinking about shading now. It's a pretty flat object. It's actually a cube that has some rounded corners, but it's got this textured grill kind of across the front. So I'm adding some flicks of color that run along those lines. I'm not trying to hit every line, thinking about kind of where my light source might be coming from and adding a little bit of that BG23 along the rings and along that base as it comes up and around on the underside of the handle. The next color is BG45, and I'm doing this color in all the same areas I just added the BG23, but in less amounts. As I get darker, when I work from light to dark, as I get darker, I do less and less of each color. So now on the handle, I'm coming into those like finger bumps or those little bumps and kind of hitting those bumps, doing less and less. And then the last color I'm adding is actually a B14, so a blue. And this is where I felt like it added a little bit of that feel of retro by adding more of a blue color in on some of those darkest areas. I felt like it really kind of pushed the feel of the coloring. So I really don't add it very much. Way down at the base, way down at the bottom corners, and a couple little flicks out on the underside of the handle. I'm going to go back and soften that just a little bit as I work my way back through my colors. BG45. I don't need a whole lot of it, but I'm just adding that in real carefully on those areas that have the B14. BG23. Again, this is going to be really quick blending because these colors kind of melted together from the beginning. This will take a little more time. The BG10 needs just a little bit more because it was a little bit of a jump. And you can see it in some places where it had had time to dry a little bit more. So it took a little more work, but it still blends really, really nicely, touching up those light areas. I forgot that center dial, so I added a few more layers on that with my darker colors and then softening again. And then for the buttons and a little bit more color on the dial and the handle, I added some grays. I have a C1 and a C3 that I'm coming in and adding some color with. Just wanted to add small touches. I figured the face of that dial is more white than anything, and so I really just wanted to add that shape and push that back inward on the radio itself and add a little bit of dimension onto those buttons. Just want to thank Power Poppy so much for this adorable digital set of stamps. I hope you've had a chance to do some coloring this week. If you haven't had a chance, please like the YouTube channel so you can get this in your inbox each week and ask questions. I am always here to answer. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a happy, colorful week.